You are listening to the People Centric Podcast, where we talk through the toughest challenges that people face at work and give practical advice to fixing those challenges. Thanks for joining our movement to create workplaces that are happier, healthier, aligned, and empowered by putting people at the center of all that we do.
Hello, People Centric leaders. I am Philip Herzog, and today we are going to be talking about culture change and how you know when you're ready. So before we dive into culture, something you might say specialize in here at People Centric, I'll introduce you to Diana Royalty, our co-founder and chief operations officer. Diana, welcome.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. This topic that we're doing today is awesome. It's big, it's hairy, and I like it.
It's a whale of a topic,
It
that
is.
is for sure. And culture, what is your favorite part about a healthy culture? Maybe I'll throw out a random question before we begin.
Favorite part about a healthy culture,
Yes.
I think it's that in healthy cultures, you don't wake up on Monday morning like want to cry going to work. You kind of are like, you know what? It's work and I'm going to go and it's going to be awesome today.
No
And
Sunday scaries.
no
No
Sunday
Sunday
scaries.
scaries.
Yeah,
And
that's my favorite.
Bethany Taff, our engagement manager. Yes. What is your favorite part of a healthy culture?
Well, yeah, I think it's just having a really clear mission for what we're doing. That's what I really like. And usually, if you have a healthy culture, then you have a great team too. And I think it matters a lot if you like the people that you work with too. It makes your work more fun. And if you all have a common goal that you're working towards, like that's just the best. It feels very purposeful in that way.
Mm, I love that. Well, it may be another thing I would add. We talk about healthy culture, and it's not that a healthy culture is free from any stress or terror at times. That's just business. So, no Sunday scaries. Maybe you wait till Wednesday or Thursday in a healthier culture to have a few of those bumps in the road. A part of the reason this topic came to mind, we actually received some fan mail. So we often talk about the piles and piles of fan mail that get delivered to us. They've been sending bigger trucks lately. It's taken more time to go through it all. And there's a leader that reached out and said, "Hey, this podcast has been helpful and explained some pieces why." But then they said, "I would love to hear from your team an answer to this question. How can we recognize when our organization's truly ready for a culture change?" And as Diana said, that's a big, hairy question. And the three of us were taking a lot of time to talk about that beforehand. What does that really mean and look like even? And for me, the part that stood out to me is I love this question. How can we recognize when we're ready for a change? And that really led us to start saying, what does culture change really look like? And is culture impacted by just one person? So maybe that's the first question. What is culture change?
Yeah, culture. It's a really, well, you said this is a really big topic. So that's the thing is the question is, it's a really good question. How do you know when you're ready for a culture change? But that was when I read it, I was also like, well, what do they mean by a culture change exactly? Because people have lots of different perspectives on this word culture, right? Like I think there's been, probably in the past 10 to 15 years, you've heard people talk about culture in the sense of like, we just want to create a fun work environment for people. And some people, it's more, related to like team dynamics. And, some people, it is more focused on like, well, we want to just make sure that we, have great processes in place. And it's really all of that stuff has a lot of clarity. And it's like, well, there's like elements of all of that are true. And you've heard us talk about like what we would say impacts your culture. And it is things like process, it is things like people, it is things like, well-developed managers and leaders. It is having a great strategy. It is, really solid communication. And so if that's what you mean by culture, then yes, let's talk about that. But I think there are lots of questions about like what does culture change actually? Diana, were you going to add something?
mean, yeah, this is big, right? And I think when we talk about culture, we talk about two things, alignment and empowerment. And I think those two things sound really easy, like, oh, yeah, get everyone aligned, get everyone empowered, no big deal. Then you have a good culture, then your culture is healthy. But those two things also encompass a lot of other things. So, yeah, when you say like culture change, to me, that's saying I need to change either my alignment or my empowerment or both, right? And so that's where my brain originally goes. But it also is that like, how do you do that? Where do you start with that? So yeah, that's kind of where my brain went with it.
Yeah. And is it just like a feeling for you? Is it like, how are you measuring what a culture change is too? Is it like we want people to feel better about their workplace? Or is it like, no, 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 we just know there are some things specifically that we need to improve on that we hope will impact that feeling, but also will impact our productivity or our effectiveness or our quality or whatever it is. But like, what is the measure for you as an organization of culture change, which I guess kind of goes further down into this topic, but
Yeah.
In the question too, I hear, and they may not have meant it this way, but a leader asking that question, how do we recognize when we're ready for culture change, is almost the question of when will we know where the pain will be less, or the pushback, or the struggle, or the challenge will really balance the risk and reward of it. It is maybe a question I'm thinking of. And while it's a huge topic, I would say, well, I think the time is always now, really, because if you're not changing it now, if it's not the way you want it now, then when will it be? And there's probably always something else that keeps you from making that air quotes change, whatever that looks like, right? Whether it's tools to systems to people to structure to process. Um, and wherever that's weakest is probably causing the most pain first. So I think all of us might be agree. It probably would be a conversation, step one. And then two, to really lean into which area the change should happen is to just ask, well, where in all of these systems do you find the most pain? And that's probably the most important area to start looking at change. Diana, what did you
That's a
have to add?
really great point. I love that you were saying like, where's the most pain? Because I think that is what this question really is addressing. Like, we have pain. I want to change it. How do I know they'll be ready for change? And so I was going to talk a little bit about how we do a lot of change management, and change is always hard, even if it's for the best, right? It's sort of like, I don't know, I'm going to paint my walls. Well, to paint your walls, it takes a lot of prep time and it takes a lot of thought, and you have to pick the color, and you have to tape the tape the area, and you have to put the drop cloth, and then you have to move all the furniture, and then you have to like paint it, and then you have to let it dry, and then you have to rehang everything. And all of that change, even if it's beautiful and wonderful and good, it takes time and intent. And then when you're sitting in the room, it feels different and it's weird, and it's changes hard, even if it's for the better. So, like Philip was saying, if you're feeling pain, you should change it, but just know that that change isn't going to immediately alleviate your pain either.
mhm. That's good. And I think also, so it's like if you're feeling pain, it's probably the right time. And you know what? Sometimes I think it's like maybe you actually aren't feeling pain yet, but you have a vision for what's next or what's coming. And you know that like there will be pain if you don't make adjustments for that thing, if it's growth or whatever it is. I'm thinking about like specifically actually like our church, which we don't as an organization work a lot with churches, but just in my personal life looking at like our church has grown a ton. And so it's recognizing some pains right now, right? That we're saying like, okay, we have to figure out how do we make adjustments for that for the future. And so I think, and also maintain a culture, a certain type of culture within this group that we have sort of formed here. And so sometimes it's not necessarily, I think even when you think about that, sometimes it's not necessarily like a culture change. It's like, how do we maintain a culture that we've already built on, that we really love this culture that's been created, but how do we adjust to maintain that culture with some of these kind of pain point areas too. So I think that's another thing to consider, because some of you might be listening and thinking like, well, I actually really like our culture, but we still have some pain. Does that mean we have to like throw everything out and start over? And I think the answer is no, that's not necessarily true. Maybe you do have a great culture, but we need to work on some things to make sure that you can maintain that, or your culture might change in a way that you don't want it to change.
Yeah. I was also thinking about how we identify, right? If we're your consultant, how would we identify that you're ready for a culture change? One, you hired us, so maybe that's a thing. But two, I think it's when the employees start asking for it, right? When and your employees are not going to come to you and be like, "We think it's time for a culture change." That those words are not going to be said because that's just not how people work. So when we go in and start hearing phrases like, I don't understand the long-term vision. I don't know where I fit in. What if we did it this way? I don't know why we do it this way. I've been thinking about all of these other things that we could do better, or whatever those things are. Like, I think when employees start questioning whys and asking for more, then you're really, really ready. That's the time when employees are like, I need more from this that I'm not getting. And I think that can be a really powerful indicator.
What can I ask a question? What are some of the things that you all have heard from people about, like, when they feel like we're not ready yet? We know we need to make some cultural changes, but we're just not ready yet. Like, what does that mean? What are some of the reasons that you've heard from people saying those kinds of things?
Man, it's usually people trying to get things prepared before a change, right? It's usually like, well, we're going through this uh software update and that's just eating a lot of our time. Or we are going to hire this new key position, or this key player is going to retire, or whatever it is. It's usually people are, I'm going to say this really bluntly, they're making excuses for things that they feel unready for. But the truth is, those things are going to happen in every culture, in every change, in every moment of business. And we have to figure out ways to work with those things and not build systems around them, right? You have to work with them in the moment when it's happening, instead of, I'm going to make sure this thing is done with a tidy little bow and then move to the next thing with a tidy little bow. That's just not how it ever works. I think it's when people really make excuses to not do something, then you're really not ready, right? You're making the excuses not to do it.
We might edit this out, but it's when whatever the but is, yeah, we want to do that, but they make the buts really big. And you're like, well, yeah, but it could be and we want to do this and we see it's the right time to make the change. And to your point, Diana, of making those really small boxes that then just basically take it out of your hands. Well, we want this to change, but we can't. I feel like we've heard a lot of people, a lot of it comes down to being challenging to hire and retain a great talent pool is consistently one of the biggest questions people have when they first start talking with us also, which is a great desire, but also a slow output of changed culture. And maybe that's why it's hard. I think culture is such a broad thing. I sometimes think of a team culture is almost like the gravity of where it takes you. So that idea of alignment and empowerment, when things are going great, like how do we behave as a team? When things are going bad, how do we behave as a team? And a healthy culture really shows that quickly. Because we were talking, before we started this podcast, mission and vision and values are amazing things to have. A lot of organizations have them and still have lackluster cultures. So what's the missing gap there, would you say? Or yeah, kind of to that point. Bethany, you had something you wanted to share.
Well, you were just talking about, I think the first part of what you were saying was like about their team too. And what I was thinking about with that is I think, yeah, sometimes you might go into an organization and they might say, like, yeah, I'm not sure if we have the right people here for the culture that we want to have. And so then that sparks lots of questions, because it's like, I think the first I don't know, instinct of people is that they're like, maybe we just need to like let people go and just like, we just haven't been able to find the right people. And it's like, well, maybe I mean, that's not impossible, but I don't know if I would start there, right? So it's like one area that we would look at is to say like, well, let's look at your managers and let's look at your leadership and like, how are you leading from the top, and then how's the next level leading, and so on. Have you set the foundation as a leader to have a really great team on, I was going to say on your team, the right people on your team, um, or not. And I think if you can adequately say like, yeah, here's all of the things that we're doing, and this is the way that we're leading, and this is how I've created clarity for people, and this is the communication habits that we've put in place with these people, and everybody knows what winning looks like. uh Amazing. Then maybe you do not have the right people on your team, but I wouldn't start there when building a new culture. I would say let's work on some of those other areas and then identify if you have people in the right places and if they can be successful in those roles because you have the right leaders as well, and they have been equipped to effectively lead. So that's where I was wanting to focus on what you said, Philip.
Yeah, but it also sparked in me something that I like to say a lot, and it is that you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And what I mean by that is you can have a big goal of like, we're going to change the culture, but culture is changed through the systems that support culture. And those systems are people, communication, management, strategy, and process. So if you if you don't have good systems within that culture framework, you're gonna fall. You're gonna falter because you could have these really great goals, but if the goals aren't supported by the systems, you're not going to reach the goals.
Yeah.
So I think in any case, if you're ready for that culture change, you need to decide what the systems are that are going to support that culture change.
Can you say that one more time? Because I love that quote.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I was like, say what, man? I don't know. I can't repeat anything.
Repeat that system. Rise to the.
You don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. And I kind of look at it as like, you know what? I'm going to make the goal if I'm going to be an Olympic swimmer, I'm going to beat Michael Phelps. I don't own a pool. That's that's problem number one. I don't have a pool. Problem number two, don't set foot in a gym. That's problem. So unless I build the systems underneath me to support that goal, I'm never going to get there. I've just most of the time manifesting something like that isn't going to work.
And there's other limitations sometimes,
Like I'm 4'11" and he's like 6'8".
I mean, I'm just saying there are
I
sometimes
thought
limitations you have
Bethany was going to say the largest body of water near you has killer whales in it. That was the limiting factor. It's not you, it's your water sources.
You have to know those things too. But then no, that's not where I was gonna go. But I mean, yes, I love that quote too, Diana, because it's like, we talked about Philip, you brought up like mission, vision, values, and I agree. We would totally love to start in that place with an organization if they don't have that, or if they do, and we need to say like, hey, this is like your foundation. Let's create this because you have to have this in order to build a really great culture upon that. But you can't create this mission, vision, values, or these goals and then expect magic to happen, because that's just not how any of that works. And so to Diana's point, that's why it's so important to then say like, what's our plan behind this to actually go in and execute it? We've said this so many times, like how many times have we, gone into an organization and seen or heard that they've done strategic planning and they've created a plan, or they have created a mission, vision, values, and then they put it on the shelf and then they never did anything with it the next year. It's like you just have to be able to actually create the next steps to say, okay, we want to live out this mission and vision, but what does that actually mean, and what are the gaps to getting there? What are to Diana's point, what are the things that it's like, hey, we don't have those resources right now. Okay, how are we going to get those resources? And also, how are we going to use those resources? Great. And then, oh yeah, what are some of those limitations, those outside factors that like we just kind of have to confront and we may never be able to actually meet because
Are you saying I will never be an Olympic gold swimmer and beat Michael
I
Phelps?
didn't say that. I just said you'll never be 6 foot something.
I definitely will never be that. You're right. Thanks for not crushing my dreams.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know about that. Science is pretty wild. I bet there's some leg extenders we could figure
Leg
something out. There's
extenders.
some flappers
Oh
we could
no.
get some genetically engineered. Other than Diana becoming an Olympic swimmer, I do think that we meet lots of organizations that kind of make that statement, Bethany, that you mentioned earlier, where, yeah, well, this is our goal for this culture. But they indicate the reason that we're not this culture is because of these crazy people around us. Can you believe it? It's because of them that we're not a culture that we want to be. And Diana, you mentioned something early on too. I didn't want us to bypass it all, which is a lot of times maybe there's systems at play and you don't actually build buy-in with the people on your team. You might just have an amazing leadership team that has a brilliant idea and they say, "Hey, everyone, we did a strategic plan. We have the rules. This is our mission. These are our values and change." And then there's no functional change that happens. And I would say, barring in mind with your quote of you fall to the level of your systems, it's oftentimes because they have not asked the people who really run and daily function in those systems for their input to either improve or make a difference in those systems in line with the goal that the organization has. So I was curious if either of you kind of in my mind, it's a little bit of a leadership role question about leadership's role in culture change, because there's certainly a specific part for leadership, but it does take everyone on the team. So Diana, your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna out some things here. I don't necessarily think that most culture is driven by leaders. I think most of the culture is driven by the people doing the work on the day-to-day basis. Um, does that mean that leaders cannot influence culture? No, I think that leaders absolutely influence culture, but I think that most of the time culture is set by the people doing the work on the front lines, the people who are making the product or delivering the service or interacting with clients and vendors. Like they're the people that are creating your culture. So I think it's very funny when leaders come to me and are like, I have a great idea. We're going to change our culture. We're going to become high performing culture. Wow. Okay. Good job, man. How are you going to do that? Like, you're just going to go tell everybody to go be high performing. It doesn't work that way. So yeah, I kind of chuckle when I think leaders feel that they have to do all of the work and like figure out the culture because
Yeah,
they
but
could stay
Diana,
until
what if we
really,
just set like higher goals for people?
yeah,
That's how
yeah,
we're
let's do
gonna do
that.
it.
Yeah. Let's see how that works. Let's
What's
just see
wrong
how that
with
works.
that?
Diana, we're going to throw you in the water and just say you to swim faster. We're going to remind you how fast Michael Phelps swims. And even if you go half as fast, maybe
Fine.
you're kind of barely making the cut, but that's a great culture performance initiative.
Yeah, right. Just throw me in the water and keep yelling at me to swim faster.
Yeah,
It's
that'll
gonna
that should do it. Then we would know if you're good or not, and then we'll just if you're not good, then I guess get out of here.
if I'm not good, then fire me. I'm gonna have to go swim somewhere else.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I
Yeah.
think that's really good. I mean, I think it's funny. I'm looking at that question and I'm like, yeah, yes, leaders do change culture, and no, they don't. So to Diana's point, no, they don't fully change culture themselves. But I do think good leadership is so important to allowing a culture to change, right? To setting it up to be able to happen. Because like we were saying before, is like for one thing, like you do have to have a little bit of vision, right? So like if you have nobody who is sort of like the visionary of your organization who's sort of saying like, hey, here's the direction that we're headed, it's really hard to create a culture, or it's just going to be sort of a chaotic culture in some ways too, because people are going to have lots of different versions of like what the vision is for the organization or the direction that we're going. So I think that's a really important piece of it. But then beyond that, it's like, okay, then the leaders from the top to cascading down, it's like, well, then you do have to create really solid leaders who are making sure that they have put people in the right places, and that they have given them opportunities to shine and use their skill sets and understand those things, and talk to them and hold them accountable, and all of that stuff impacts your culture. So if you don't have those two pieces, those effective leaders in that way, then it also is going to not, it's not going to create a great culture. You know what I mean? So it's like it's yes and no.
Yeah. And I also, just to go back to the tell them to swim faster, I do think that every organization needs goals. That's not what every organization needs goals. You need realistic, attainable goals. You need to then make sure that your department heads know how they are contributing to the overall goals. And then you need to make sure that your individuals know how they fit in their department and how they fit into the organization. Everybody needs that. But it's about, to Bethany's point, talking to those people and saying, this is the overarching goals. How can you support us? How can you help us get there? What are some things that you want to accomplish to help us further these goals? And how can we help you further your goals? So those things have to be in conjunction with each other, and they have to be realistic and attainable. And everybody needs to keep their eyes on them to get it moving forward. So instead of saying, Diana, just swim as fast as Michael Phelps, say, okay, Diana, here's your baseline. What if you're 10% faster? Can you get to 10% faster if we give you the resources and the training and the what, like if we support you, can you do that? And I would be like, heck yeah, I can do that. Right.
Yeah, I love that. I was gonna say, and is Michael Phelps even the standard? Is that even the right thing? Do we even need to copy this person? Do we even why are we in the right lane? Anyways,
Swimming lane. Good
we
job.
can get deep into that metaphor.
This analogy has gone deep.
That's right. Deeper. If we start using a scuba analogy, then literally would be getting deeper. I think I was flying back from a trip recently over the ocean, and I hate turbulence. So to distract myself from that, I was watching Flaming Hot Cheetos. It was the only movie that was interesting to me on the plane. Flaming Hot Cheetos. And so it's about this guy that helped Frito-Lay design the spicy chip flavors that we all know and love. And it's a very very cheesy, pun intended, maybe, movie. But what caught my attention, it's an example just like this. So the CEO of Frito-Lay sends out a video during the 80s when there's a recession all around, people are losing their jobs, and the video says, we need good ideas from every team member at Frito-Lay. And this guy who's been a janitor for 8 years sees the video and he feels like the CEO is speaking directly to him. And so he goes and he and his significant other create this amazing recipe. And then they, long story short, get it to the CEO and he's curious. So he comes to the plant to try this new flavor and it leads to this whole thing. And the guy became the first director of I think it was like cultural marketing for Frito-Lay. Very cool story. But there's this intermediate part where everyone else in the plant, the whole chain of command below the CEO and between this janitor guy, were mad at the janitor because they said, "How dare you mess up our system? This is not how it works around here." And I think it's a great example of, and a lot of this was fact checked by me in the airport afterward. The CEO genuinely wanted to make a change, but was surrounded by leaders at multiple levels who valued bureaucracy over meaningful change. And that was a part of the culture that they had experienced. So even a new CEO had to coast and cruise a little bit with the culture that was in place before him. And so it took so much more work to get these good ideas to the table. So I would maybe, as we round it out, and I'd love your final takeaways too. One of my final takeaways, one key measure of a good culture is our good ideas, no matter where they come from, do they have a lifeline to circulate and become viable if they're truly good, right? Do people have that option to do that? Awesome. If not, you probably have some room for work, and that involves everyone. Final thoughts, Diana, Bethany.
Yeah. So I think the original question was,
How can we recognize when our organization is truly ready for culture change?
okay, my final take is it's never truly ready. Just do it. Right. Like it's never going to be the perfect time. There is no great big thing that you can do that will just set everybody on the right path right away. It takes intent, it takes focus, it takes systems. So yeah, there's never a perfect time, but I promise you now is the right time.
Yeah, yeah. And to our point that we talked about before is just like don't leave your team behind in effort to create culture change. So make sure that your team is there with you and that there is buy-in. And so, or else it's your ideas for culture change are not going to happen.
Wonderful advice. We tackled this whale of a topic, and clearly more deep diving swimming opportunities ahead. But to the listener who asked the question, thank you. Curious what your thoughts are on this. Go and lead well, be well. This is from the People Centric Team. You've got it. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the People Centric Podcast. We are so grateful for you joining us every week. If you like this content, please like and subscribe. Also, feel free to share on your social media with everyone that you know. It really does help us. If you would like to contact us, I have put our information in the show notes. Please reach out anytime. We love hearing from you. We will be back next week with a new topic. Until then, be well and lead well.